On this Sunday night, the consequences of a celebration turned sour. The fallout from the mayhem at Toronto's festival Eritrea. With police now under scrutiny. More bridges in Crimea bombed. Ukraine's new attacks and the latest war crime Russia is accused of. The fight for the right to choose in Texas.
The state doesn't care about the lives of their constituents.
The battle between judges and the potential punishments for doctors who perform abortions. And a milestone with fond military memories.
Because we wanted to see the world.
A Second World War veteran's flight path with the Royal Canadian Air Force.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Coleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Outrage is mounting in Canada's largest city in the wake of a community celebration that turned violent. Chaos erupted yesterday when protesters stormed the Eritrean festival in Toronto. It's intended to be a cultural celebration of the African nation, but experts say the protesters, Eritreans themselves, came out to demonstrate against the current government. As Amar Khan explains, the city has now cut the festival short.
Chaos ensuing as protesters tear down fences and tents at Festival Eritrea in Toronto. On Saturday morning, violence breaking out, sending 9 people to the hospital, including one who was stabbed and critically injured.
The attack was totally unprecedented and improvised.
Members of Toronto's Eritrean community left stunned and shocked.
It's a kind of vandalism. This is what they did, is a vandalism. It is a senseless, I call it, it's a senseless disturbance.
Located in northeast Africa and once a part of Ethiopia, in 1993, Eritrea became its own country, now home to more than 3.5 million people. The festival has taken place in Toronto for 25 years, many of those at Earls Court Park. An expert on African history says those who frequent the festival are supporters of the government and protesters against.
This is not the first time that there have been protests or opposition to it around the world. Those opposing it are Eritreans who fled the unbridled tyranny in the country.
The violence led the city of Toronto to revoke the festival's license, essentially cancelling it. On Sunday, a heavy police presence and City of Toronto security as the tents came down, many frustrated at the city's decision.
The victim is being re-victimized by revoking the license.
Kyriakakos says the Eritrean communities met with Toronto police, calling for security for several weeks, including as late as this week.
What went wrong? It's still to be accounted.
Toronto police say they deployed officers throughout the event and sent in reinforcements once the violence broke out. They added they are continuing to investigate the incident. The Eritrean community is supposed to host a gala event tonight, where protesters say they will be present. Kyriakakos says the police and city need to do better.
The threat is unacceptable. The potential violence, it's unacceptable.
This year's festival, Eritrea, is over, ending on a dark note. And this community that's familiar with hardship will now have to wait another year to celebrate its culture together. Amar Khan, Global News, Toronto.
It has been an unprecedented summer for wildfires across Canada, especially in British Columbia. In the past 24 hours alone, more than 30 new fires have begun in the province. Firefighters are using every tool at their disposal, and this weekend that includes starting fires. Elissa Carpenter explains.
We don't want to evacuate in case it gets close to town. We don't want to lose power.
For Jim Hildebrandt and his neighbors living in and around Sparwood, BC, fire has become a part of the summer season. The Ladner Creek fire has been burning for weeks while more than 125 firefighters work night and day to try and keep it at bay.
They're doing control burns to so they won't get the power line and then stop it from spreading in town. So at least we're not going to lose our power here, hopefully.
But it's tinder dry, and just as residents thought firefighters were getting the upper hand, another flare-up over the weekend.
We actually returned from vacation and had seen it spark up. We actually live down close to where some of the fires are burning, White Birch, near the rec center.
There's a lot of dead stuff on that mountainside, and they have to get rid of it somehow. It's Mother Nature doing its job.
The fire situation in this small BC community playing out right across British Columbia. Right now, there are more than 360 wildfires burning in the province. That includes 32 new fires in the past 24 hours. For Wildfire BC, it's a fine balancing act, juggling the resources needed to fight active fires, bringing in resources from other parts of Canada, while also employing prevention and suppression techniques. The BC Wildfire Service posting videos to its YouTube channel this weekend showing firefighters conducting several planned ignitions in various parts of the province. The goal is to get rid of what fuels the fire, that dry vegetation, by burning it away in a planned and controlled fashion.
It can be counterintuitive for folks because you're introducing fire to fire.
It says several successful planned ignitions have taken place, with more to come this week. While they are one effective tool, there are a number of other factors, including the forecast, that go into deciding whether that's the best way to fight an active fire. As for this fire near Sparwood, the mayor is betting on Mother Nature.
The only thing that's really going to put it out is snow. So we'll start seeing snow here in the next, up top, potentially in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Elissa Carpenter, Global News.
A major fire has erupted at a commercial lumber yard in Winnipeg. Firefighters first responded overnight, calling for more help as the flames grew. Several homes in the area were evacuated as a precaution. People are now back home, but they're being told to keep their doors and windows closed due to air quality concerns. One firefighter suffered minor injuries and was treated at the scene. There are no reports of any other injuries. From fire to water, at least 3 people have been killed in Slovenia as the country works to recover from devastating floods. A month's worth of rain hammered 2/3 of the country on Friday. The mayor of this northern settlement, nearly wiped out by the floods, says it's an enormous loss that has ruined us. While the cleanup is underway, roads have been washed out, buildings swamped, and bridges broken throughout the country. Slovenia's prime minister says this is the country's worst natural disaster. The government has earmarked 10 million euros for humanitarian aid. A passenger train has derailed in southern Pakistan, killing at least 30 people and injuring at least 100 others. The train was on a cross-country trip carrying about 1,000 people when several cars came off the tracks. Emergency crews are working to free survivors from the wreckage. Investigators are still trying to figure out what caused the derailment, but say the train was traveling at a normal speed. Accidents are common on Pakistan's decaying and outdated rail system. It's deadline day in Niger. West African neighbors are giving that military junta until today to reinstate democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum. If it doesn't, it could face a military intervention. As of now, coup leaders haven't budged. Some people took to the streets of the country's capital today to voice their support for the coup. Ottawa is condemning it and has now suspended direct financial aid to Niger's government. Between 2021 and 2022, Canada provided more than $2.7 million to the country. Retaliatory attacks against Russian aggression appear to be ramping up. 2 bridges connecting Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine with Crimea have been damaged after an apparent missile attack. It marks Ukraine's latest attempt to disrupt Russian supply lines and military operations in Crimea and the Black Sea. And as Redmond Shannon reports, Kyiv is trying to shore up more international support against Russia's full-scale invasion.
Explosions at 2 of the bridges connecting Russian-annexed Crimea with the other Russian-held parts of Ukraine. The second attack on one of the bridges in 6 weeks. The local Russian-backed governor says damage to the important supply lines were caused by Ukraine's NATO-supplied Storm Shadow missiles. Like this one. President Volodymyr Zelensky signing one of the Storm Shadows provided by France. Note the Eiffel Tower on top of Ukraine's trident symbol. Zelensky posthumously honouring an Air Force member on the country's Air Force Day and praising service members for their efforts. Earlier this week, he said training on Western-supplied F-16 fighter jets will start this month. Zelensky said this overnight airstrike on a blood transfusion centre is a war crime. It killed 2 people on a night when Ukraine says it shot down 57 of Russia's 70 missile and drone attacks. The volley, an apparent retaliation for Ukraine striking against a Russian Navy ship and a tanker in the Black Sea in recent days. Russia says it also intercepted another drone aimed at Moscow Sunday. And it accuses Ukraine of hitting a university in Russian-occupied Donetsk with cluster bombs. Global News cannot verify those claims. In Saudi Arabia on the weekend, a Ukraine peace conference gathered 40 nations together, excluding Russia, but including the Kremlin's hugely influential ally, China.
So what they're doing is they are trying to flip more neutral countries, and we saw China participate, which is a big deal.
The Jeddah meeting ended with participants agreeing on more talks. Zelensky hopes for a formal summit later in the year.
But it's going to take a lot of time, and I think the Ukrainian government is doing, hard diplomatic work and bringing people together who don't agree.
The territorial integrity of Ukraine is key to any peace plan. And on that, the two sides remain as far apart as ever. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Making a rare exception. Coming up, why a new ruling on the strict abortion ban in Texas likely won't hold. And how the next provincial election in this country could reverse the blue Tory wave. A painful back-and-forth battle is underway over abortion rights in Texas. A judge has ruled the state's abortion ban is too restrictive for women with serious pregnancy complications. But just as the temporary injunction was put in place, it was blocked by an appeal.
The state doesn't care about the lives of their constituents.
Less than 3 weeks after Amanda Zerowski uttered those words, Judge Jessica Magrum agreed there needs to be an exception to the abortion laws in Texas. In her ruling, Magrum said, "The court finds that there is uncertainty regarding whether the medical exception to Texas's abortion bans permits a physician to provide abortion care where, in the physician's good faith judgment and in consultation with the pregnant person, a pregnant person has a physical emergent medical condition." But just as quickly as the injunction went into place, it was blocked by an appeal to the Texas Supreme Court. In a statement, the Attorney General's office called it ineffective, adding the status quo remains in effect.
Millions of children were losing their lives every year in Texas before they were even born. But not any more in Texas.
Just over a year ago, abortion was banned in Texas, with very few exceptions. It's one of 15 states that do not allow the procedure for fetal anomalies. Doctors who perform abortions risk life in prison and fines of up to $100,000. The challenge filed in March aimed to force clarity on exceptions under the strictest law in the U.S.
Oh, man.
Samantha Cassiano, one of 13 women who sued the state, became visibly distressed as she testified she'd had to carry her child Halo until she went into labor despite the baby's fatal condition.
I had to watch my baby suffer.
Zerowski says reliving her pain publicly was worth the outcome, but it's an outcome that may not stick in a state where most abortion providers have already closed their doors. Ahead, expect plenty of mudslinging as Manitoba Conservatives fight to hang on in a fall election. It's the middle of summer, but political pundits are already looking ahead to the fall when Canada's next provincial election is set to happen. Manitobans head to the polls October 3rd. Premier Heather Stefanson is looking to keep her Conservatives in power for a third term. And despite a long Tory winning streak, as Eric Sorensen explains, Stefanson is facing a tough fight.
Since taking over as Manitoba's Conservative Premier, it's been a bumpy ride for Heather Stefanson. Polls showed Manitobans disapproved of her handling of the pandemic. More recently, she's been under fire from protesters and others for the province's decision not to fund the search of a landfill for missing persons.
I have to protect all Manitobans throughout this, including those that would be asked to go into those landfills.
That and issues such as health care have put Stephenson on the defensive against her main challenger, the NDP's Wab Kinew, with the next election just 8 weeks away.
I think it's time that you have a provincial government you can be proud of again.
Polls show the two parties are close, but the Conservatives trail in Winnipeg, where most battleground seats are fought.
They really have to work harder on getting Winnipeg voters on their side if they want to save power in the legislature.
Conservative parties have done well in provinces across the country ever since Justin Trudeau's federal Liberals were elected. Since 2015, voters in 7 provinces have changed from left of centre to Conservative-leaning governments: Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and the 3 Maritime provinces. In all, 13 elections, including 6 Conservative governments re-elected and no defeats. Among provincial premiers, Saskatchewan's Scott Moe and Nova Scotia's Tim Houston have the highest approval rating in the most recent Angus Reid survey, but trailing the pack is Heather Stephenson of Manitoba, an approval of just 25%.
Sometimes you're going to have a situation where an electorate wants to zig a certain way federally and zag a certain way provincially, but also you can have an electorate that's simply tired of the government of the day.
Stephenson can expect to be in the crosshairs of both the Liberals, led by Dugald Lamont, and Kinew's NDP.
Heather Stephenson can't run on the disaster in the healthcare system right now.
Stephenson told Global's Clay Young she's ready for what's coming.
I think we need to have thick skin in politics, and it's certainly not going to change anything that we're going to do to get out there and fight hard for Manitobans.
Christopher Adams expects a mudslinging campaign.
I think it will be a tough campaign. I think similar to what we saw in Alberta, I think we'll see some pretty heavy messaging coming up here in Manitoba.
No Conservative provincial government in the country has lost in the last 8 years. Heather Stephenson's Manitoba PCs will have a fight on their hands not to become the first. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
Next, a Second World War vet feted for her work and a milestone birthday. Heartbreak for Team USA at the Women's World Cup. It lost to Sweden in the round of 16 teams. The Americans had dominated every stat except the score, needing penalty kicks after a 0-0 draw. The game ended dramatically when the Swedes' game-winning shot appeared to be saved before video review showed the ball crossed the line by just millimeters. This is the earliest the U.S. women's national team has ever been eliminated from the World Cup. Most of us experienced the Second World War through photographs. That's also the case for Yvonne Wildman. The difference is she was actually there taking photographs as part of her job serving her country. One of many women working for the Royal Canadian Air Force. As Brodie Radcliffe reports, she's celebrating a very special milestone with a lot of memories.
So you can become what you want to if you really push it.
It was an important week for Yvonne Wildman, celebrating her 100th birthday.
Happy birthday to you!
Happy 100!
I'm surprised.
Yvonne grew up with 7 siblings, all of whom were boys. By the time she was 19, she joined the Royal Canadian Air Force.
My girlfriend and I decided to join because we wanted to see the world.
Like her dad, she was interested in engines. But her dream of working on motors was stalled. Mechanics required a grade 10 certificate. Yvonne only finished grade 8.
Well, I went into photography. Not because I wanted to, because they wouldn't let me go into what I wanted to.
After 6 months of basic training, she was sent to Vulcan, Alberta, where she helped the bomber pilots train. Although she admits the first flight she was on made her queasy.
Well, I couldn't have cared if that plane had crashed.
When the war was over, Yvonne and the rest of the RCAF Women's Division were let go. She returned home, got married, and had 7 children. Not just telling her family about her experiences during the war, but showing them.
It's a part of my life I'd do again.
As for her secret to a long life, her lips are sealed.
Do you have any secrets?
Nope.
No secrets at all? Didn't.
Well, if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
Brody Ratcliffe, Global News, Saskatoon.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Coleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is Vancouver's 45th annual Pride Parade.
Happy Pride!
The theme for this year's festival is Reconnect, focusing on the Vancouver Pride Society's commitment to amplify marginalized community voices. And the parade is also on a new expanded route for greater accessibility, allowing thousands to get together to have fun during BC's long weekend. Thanks for watching. Farah Nasser will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.